this category would be captured classification of joint use, and also exclusion not feasible in the case of common pool resources, aquifers, fishing grounds, petroleum reserves would be commonly shared, and important resources that therefore could not exclude its use. And public good also has both characteristics. So exclusion not feasible, and it is expected of non-exhaustion. National defense, rule of law, or vector control would be the kind of examples. So what actually you will see four characteristics that could be found in goods or services, and of course the production would be possible by exploiting resources. Well, actually, kind of basic concept on the economy would provide a foundational thinking in for the science of fiscal administration. So, how do we distinguish between private goods and public goods? Of course, we also have some distinct concept between provision and production. In some cases, the government claims that the provision is still at the hand of government. Only production would be transferred to the private firms. So you don't have to worry about our public commission, and the kind of ultimate responsibility would be within our authority, and so the public would often be skeptical, for example, about privatization or the kind of transfer of governmental assets. So the government would lease back in the moment to sell the government assets to private firms. They would lease back to put it to public use for 90, 80 years. For example, you will see Chicago Airport, recent deals involving sales of assets, airport assets, and its long-term lease to actually shares with public, and also some important Polish objective would be present to ensure the public quality of airport operation and kind of concept. And you will see the elements that is important to identify the fiscal administration. Now consider, for example, the concept of externalities. Government also may have a law when market transactions between buyer and seller affect third parties. Externalities would involve that the third parties would be affected, and that would be positive in some cases, and often negative to adversely affect the third party. In this case, we will find some reasonable cause of public intervention. Of course, the intervention would be predicated on a due process of politics or consensus. The kind of process would be expectable. Often the externalities could not be cured in many cases. Since that value is unlikely to be fully recognized in the market transaction. So it will be bad to third parties, so you stop. But it is out of market force. These goods and services, the private return from the consumption is substantial, which could bar any surrender of parties in the market. The market will not fail to provide. And the problem is it will not provide at a socially reasonable level. And also you will perhaps understand the kind of concept, incomplete markets and imperfect information. There will be one condition or assumption that which distinguishes between dimension of pure market and public finance or budget. Several private markets, particularly those in insurance and finance, can present special problems of adverse selection and moral hazard. We now have many occasions to talk about moral hazard, and especially consequential and implicating when we think about public insurance or free rider claim or others. Consider to relate the concept with a fiscal administration. And in some cases, adverse selection occurs when insurance purchasers impose higher than average costs on sellers, or when sellers exclude such potential purchasers. So in health insurance, for example, those more likely to purchase insurance, those more likely to need care. Health insurance companies seek to exclude those more likely to require care. So paradoxical between two competing quests. In that case, how do we guarantee from adverse selection by private enterprises? And also, let us consider basic functions of government. What is mission for the government? We illustrated about the role of U.S. government, or the kind of ideas to promote promotion of general welfare. We basically consider involving national economy or fiscal administration two elements. What are those? Economic stabilization is one requirement, and also we will consider some of commission about wealth redistribution. So perhaps would be interwoven with the kind of historic progress, positive and negative liberty, and the kind of welfare staticism. Public welfare is emerging. What actually one of element now the modern government pursues, and the later concept would be variegated. What we call workfare, and what is neoliberalism. The kind of many thoughts and ideas would characterize the role and responsibility of government over history. And so, what actually the aspect is also faced out involving privatization. We now see some failure of government in what actually posed of important challenges in the eyes of market theorists. So, is it the government? Is it bomb plan misleading the fine operation of national economy? So we propose a paradigm of smaller government in some cases, and also we improve on operating efficiency and response to clients. And privatization is also importantly related with cash, and that point is very important when we think about finance, public finance, and budget. Sale of government-operated enterprises may bring government revenue. Operating profits in the future would disappear, although the enterprise would then be subject to the tax system. And consider the sacred area that could well settle about awareness and cognition. What is a inherently governmental function when we contemplate on the fiscal advice, national defense, or how do you think about a police service or others? So what actually in some extreme circle of souls, the national defense could be sold to the privatized enterprises, and of course the neighborly provision have already been made in vast scope by private enterprises, so food or other military apparatus to be produced by privatized forms or so. But in some cases, we consider the very crucial element in terms of military service. Nonetheless, we still deny the kind of idea, since the military service is pivoted on the fiduciary awareness of servicemen or their loyalty to the government. So inherently governmental in function could not be so. And actually, I also have mentioned concept the production and between production and provision. In these points of consideration, you will perhaps some notion about characteristic between two major continents, Western Europe and American continent, the United States. Nations of Western Europe would more agile or expensive to exploit privatization initiative. That is principally because the European nations have often monopolized key industries or businesses in the ownership of government or nation. So you will see many state-owned enterprises. There are lots of property with potential for privatization. Many of the big international privatizations, however, have been in industries never publicly owned in the United States. The examples would be roads, airports, the postal system, schools, and the like. Even public school system is public. That could be susceptible of privatization option. So over the decades and history, they would realize scope of privatization across the major industries that would not be same in the United States case. So the extent of privatization would not be so much encompassed. Nonetheless, in recent years, there have been a number of public asset sales or extraordinary long-term leases in the United States that are huge in the American context. I've illustrated a 99-year lease of Chicago Skyway for $1.8 million, the 75-year lease of the Indiana Toll Road for $3.8 billion, the 99-year lease of Chicago's Midway Airport for $2.5 billion, the 99-year lease of Pocahontas Parkway in Virginia for $8 million, and well, actually, the 75-year lease of parking meter revenue in Chicago for $1.60 million. So, we will see some, well, actually, box form summary on page 16. We can explore four types of privatization forms: government provision, government production, government provision, private production, and private provision, government production, private provision, and private production. Well, actually, we will make some brief conclusion about the previous discussion. Consider politics, representation, and government finance. That will be an important aspect to be interchanged with a pure theory, and a point of focus to increase the sort of fiscal administration. And one important passage to describe the lobbying activities in the United States, actually fairly heavy and influential, to second the constitutional practice in the United States. Affable men in shoes would hang around swarming. Sweetie legislative chambers, button-holding lawmakers as they swagger through lustrous bronze doors, whispering in ears, slapping backs, walking knowingly. And very enlightening example that influential congressman would like to turn his job as a lobbyist, since it would guarantee a lucrative businesses to produce a high amount of income, the kind of concept. How do you compare the practice of lobbying in the United States with the intense scene of past years in the National Assembly convention? Actually are they surely in conscience and justice to represent the interests of constitutional others? Could they be affected by business or industries? We would have no formal lobbying acts to actually prescribe any principles or limitations about lobbying activity. We just see it any kind of a criminal or moral item to be respected by politicians, and we expect their faith and loyalty. We have some piecemeal legislation to revamp in terms of public administration, but could not be extended. So the constitutional practice would characterize each quality of national practice in this aspect, or lobbying, to affect what impose, what explain the ideas into any reality of a budget or others. Through the pages of printout, you will find, for example, very important contrast involving Pareto criteria, and you will also some constitutional introduction, which pertains to our discussion. So the laws and constitution would not be separable from budget and public finance. The government power and their responsibility should be considered when we schedule tax plans or revenue terms or kind of a expenditures. You will see there, for example, Article 1, Section 8. In the U.S. federal system, constitutional terms define the elemental financial powers and limits under which the levers function. So in the Article Section 8, the powers will be to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, excises shall be uniform throughout the United States, to borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce with foreign nations among the several states and with the Indian tribes, to coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures, to establish post offices and post rolls, to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to the use shall be for longer term than 2 years, to provide and maintain a levy. So the state government would be awkward to expand in the end to establishing post offices, for example. U.S. Postal Service is unique to deliver the service, and uniquely falls within the responsibility of federal government. That should be reflected normatively in the finance and budget. So the government would tax, and ultimately the characteristic found in the fiscal administration is the power to coin money. So you'll see an important agency, federal agency, what the Federal Reserve, what usually principal authority to administer the monetary policy in the United States, and actually very influential of the basic policy to affect the global economy. And consider, for example, Article 1, Section 9, it establishes some fiscal constraints on the federal government. No capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportion to the census of enumeration herein before directed to the taker. No tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from any state. No money shall be drawn from the treasury, but in consequence of appropriation made by law, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. The point would be on conclusion, as you see, is so a very insightful summary to get through all the pages. We also consider, for example, the 11th Amendment, which bestows comprehensively the residual power of government to the state. And what others? I'm afraid the class purpose was misled. Nonetheless, I like to make an emphasis about the American legal system. It is the kind of realistic understanding of law to make a consequence, a social change, a kind of reform, betterness of public relations, or social justice. So we need to understand in first place about the power purse and their interrelationship to affect our public lives. So that was initial intention of my lecture. However, it has gone a little further to bar any other requirement. So we now have to explore thoughts. For example, you will see, for example, some very basic concept. Let us consider, for example, general consideration for all tort cases. You will need to have some understanding across vicarious liability and parties. In some cases, multiple defendants use the right. Joint and several liability, satisfaction and release, and contribution and indemnity. And also, the case would not be mute in a very series of survivor and wrongful deaths. You will consider survivor of tort actions and wrongful deaths. What are the effective claimants to seek tort damages, and tortious interferences with family relationships. Consider our basics between husband and wife, and parent and children. What are nature of action? And also, the common law code would develop many aspects of tort immunities. For example, consider interfamily tort immunities and government tort immunity, or in some cases they recognize charitable immunity concept. And you will see basic discourse involving harm to economic and dignitary interests. So what is loss or suffering to ground the tort claims? Let us consider, for example, defamation. What is defamatory language? And what is publication? The defamatory language needs to be published, since defamation would not occur if it is inside the mind or only interchanged with one person, or could be circumscribed in due condition about its confidentiality. Then the defamation will not be proved as a matter of law. And damage to plaintiff's reputation is one element to establish a cause of action. And First Amendment concerns. And what are traditional defenses of defamation? And what are mitigating factors? You will know a basic summary about this area of concern delivered in the last class. In some cases, the defendant may raise absolute privilege. The defendant may be protected by an absolute privilege for the following: remarks made during judicial proceedings, by legislators in debate, by federal executive officers, in compelled broadcasts, and between spouses. And the court find the qualified privileges sometimes, and this privilege can be lost through abuse. Sometimes the speaker may have qualified privilege for the following: reports of official proceedings, and statements in the interest of publisher, defense of one's action, property or reputation, statement in the interest of the recipient, and statement in the common interest of publisher and recipient. You will see other popular cause of action, and invasion of right to privacy. And also you will need to have an awareness as a skillful lawyer to claim your case of misrepresentation. In some cases it will be intentional and could be called fraud or deceit, and in other cases negligent misrepresentation would occur. In this case, the prima facie case will require misrepresentation by defendant in a business or professional capacity, or breach of duty to the particular plaintiff, causation and justifiable reliance, and damages. And you also have occasions to experience the kind of incident, directly or indirectly, wrongful institution of legal proceedings. That could not be unusual, since it actually brought many possibilities, which actually happened in your case, in some cases. So what is malicious prosecution? It is one element. Institution of criminal proceedings against plaintiff, termination in plaintiff's favor, absence of probable cause, improper purpose, damages. If the wrongful actor to institute legal proceedings would have some beliefs or a conviction that it is true or others, then it should be exonerated. It could not incur any tort damages. Generally, we think about absence of probable cause for prior proceedings. Insufficient facts for a reasonable person to believe the plaintiff was guilty or defendant, in fact, did not actually believe plaintiff to be guilty. And wrongful institution of legal proceedings would require improper purpose, something other than bringing a person to justice. And it requires damages. No damages means no action. Prosecutors are immune from liability. Most jurisdictions have extended the malicious prosecution action to cover civil cases. And basically, we consider negligence in general comprehension about tort theory. And we need to study some important concepts: duty of care, breach of duty, causation, damages, and defenses to negligence. And you will see proximate cause is an important guide and standard leading the causation any reasonably. So we would receive the concept, and also foreseeability is one element to be shared by both major legal traditions. And causation, in fact, is an intermediate concept in operating to perfect the causation requirement. Consider, for example, a violation of statute would constitute, in any definite terms, the breach of duty requirement. How do you see? And also, you will see some ancient concept to be remained in current system. Res ipsa loquitur, and one taste to evoke your fears of a common law and American legal system. And you will find the discourse of strict liability. What is prima facie case to prove strict liability? In this area of concern, liability for animals and ultra-hazardous or abnormal dangerous activities would be considered. In the concern how we shape any adequate theory of strict liability and what is current law to be enforced in the code, so exercise your study skills and what a research needs to perfect your purpose. Extent of liability, what is scope of duty and defense. And I also advise you to study a product's liability. What are basic principles developed in this area of concern? And of course, there is no international covenant to uniformly regulate products liability. Although we have sales contract, the international convention on sales contract, it is related with that commercial activity, and what are common elements to bring the effect of product liability, a series of liability. Product liability would generally is sold as liability based on intent. Who can sue? What are damages assessed and affected in co-foundings, and what are defenses against the product liability claim? And liability based on negligence could be sought, and duty of care, breach of duty, and causation. And liability might be evaluated involving strict tort liability when you think about product liability. So what is duty and breach of duty? And nature of damage is recoverable, and disclaimers ineffective. And also, you will perhaps know such a notorious concept to prevail over many subject of laws: implied warranties or merchantability and fitness. So who can sue and what constitutes breach would be a forced inquiry. You need to be investigated. Causation, damages, defenses, effect of disclaimers. And the common law code developed the representation theories, and will consider, for example, express warranty and misrepresentation of fact. And you will perhaps encounter the kind of claims involving nuisance. The client may be referred to you about nuisance in the residential areas or others. Actually the apartment complex is usual form of habitation in Republic of Korea, and the upper floors, rooms in upper floor, will be actually or inflict any sounds or undesired disruption for the residents of lower floors. In that case, we will see some elements in distinction against nuisance. So, what are nuisance in definition? There would be one important question to be resolved in the first place. A private nuisance would include substantial interference, unreasonable interference, trespass to land would be land, and in the last case would be distinguished generally and excluded from the scope of private nuisance, and consider the elements seriously to find any plausible argument to claim based on nuisance and public nuisance, and also what are remedies to compensate for the harms caused by nuisance. Often damages would be adequate. In many cases involving nuisance, the court would render injunctive relief. To restrain some activities as a matter of court order, and could be insured from further transgression or disruption, and abatement by self-help could be recognized in marginal context of elements, and you will see defenses against nuisance. In some cases, legislative authority may be asserted to break up the claim based on nuisance, and also conduct of others could be claimed against cause of action. One defense that could save the defendant, alleged tort features, and we also need to consider contributor negligence and what is the nature coming to the nuisance. So voluntary undertaking would often be an excuse for legal responsibility, tort liability. So consider that aspect and exercise your wisdom to understand the basics of American legal system. Okay, thank you for your attention, and perhaps we will see in another class. I'm not sure if it could be final. In any way, I will get you on notice, and please pay close attention about schedule of final exam, and perhaps available of a college notification, often put on the wall of bulletin in the first floor of this building. And also I will double check and we will mutually confirm the time and place of exams. It will be 8 minutes exam, and you will perhaps pages of exam papers, 3 or 4, and paragraphs, some brief paragraphs will be provided before the exam questions, and you will need to shape your answer hopefully in fine structure and what actually frame persuasive argument to the questions, and it would be excellent to present your personal views or opinions about questions. Could be viewed as routine with other context of classes. I'll hopefully encourage you to do the best in the final exam, and spend some helpful time in winter vacation and exercise, and also study hard to complement your term's experience, and you will we will perhaps join in the sprinters. Glad. Okay, thank you for your attention, and see you in the sprinter.